Hi there. Well, my name is John Ryland and I'm the Director of the Christian Healing Mission. And welcome to this part of our online training course, Opening Heaven's Door. And the idea behind this course is that everyone can have access to some good teaching and practical guidance on this amazing ministry of healing which has been given to us. Now, in this session, what I want us to look at is how we work really as a team as part of our local church setting. And for this, I'm going to be helped by our chaplain at the mission, Sarah Swift. And I sat down and I talked to Sarah about how we work together as a team. When we do ministry here at the mission, one thing we're very keen to do is that we always minister in pairs.
Yep.
Why is that important?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. That, first of all, Jesus sent his disciples out in pairs. I think it gives accountability to us, that you can find out what somebody else is doing, you can observe, you can correct or challenge them if you feel you might need to. It's also good to have another person praying. So you've got two people bringing this person into God's presence, which is always going to be a blessing. And you can just play different roles within it.
Can we talk about that a bit then? I mean, if you and I were ministering to somebody else, is one person kind of doing it and the other one's praying quietly, or do we have different things we're trying to achieve in that? How should two people work together best?
You'll find that different prayer models use different ways of wanting to pray. So sometimes one will say, okay, in that prayer model, the second person is always silent. In another, it will be that they chip in. I think it's always good to have decided who's going to lead and who's not, because if you've got two people asking you questions when you're being prayed for, it can be really distracting and it can feel as though there's a bit of a fight as to who's got power going on. So it's good to know what's going on or who's leading. But it's also good if the person who is leading, I always say, after we've chatted a bit with the person, is there anything else that you want to ask? So you're making sure you're including that person within it. There are times when one person may be praying and the other feels that they've got something and they'll just point to themselves. Or I might say, do you want to say anything? Knowing what your roles are is important, but work them out beforehand.
How key is this? In the sense, I'm thinking of many churches, they might not have great resources for prayer ministry teams, and it just isn't practical to have two people praying for one person. Is it if we can't have two people, is that the end of it, or is it possible to do it on your own?
Of course it's possible to do it on your own. It's good practice to have two people there, but sometimes your numbers, it's not going to work, because if you've got a lot of people coming up for prayer and you've only got a few people, you'll want to go and pray and bless what God is doing. But in that situation, I'd say make sure it's done in an open space, so that it's not that you're taking somebody away to do it in your own room or whatever that might be, in a place where they may feel threatened or anything like that. And I would also say and encourage people, or try and remember to say to people here when they come for ministry, please do say if there's anything you're uncomfortable with. We want you to be as comfortable as possible. If you've got any questions, ask us. And it's trying to make sure that the person feels safe and comfortable.
On that though, is it possible that some people, if you're trying to share something quite deep, quite personal, is it possible that the very fact that there are two people there will make you feel uncomfortable? Someone might just want to talk to one person. Is that a reasonable thing to ask?
It is a reasonable thing to ask, but then again, I would be cautious about it, because that can also be used to manipulate, with one person saying, oh, I can only talk to one person, I don't trust so-and-so. Well, actually, if you're trying to put good practice in place, I would be cautious about those who are wanting to say, no, I want it on my terms, thank you very much. There might be good reason, but I would have a few flags raised in my mind if that was going on. I'd want to talk to that person about why it was.
Okay. Just sort of pressing in with this, What are the usual guidelines about women praying with women or women praying with men? And how does that work? And how would that work with two people?
Our guidelines recommend that you always have one person of the same sex praying with somebody. So if we've got a guy coming, we would always try to make sure there is another guy praying with them. Similarly with women. It doesn't always work, but we would want to make sure that the person was comfortable with that. Have a door open if necessary, so that it's not that they feel that they can feel, so that they do feel less threatened. If that might be an issue for them. It's trying to be sensitive to the needs of the person while also providing them with prayer.
So if going back to that small church setting, there is only a ministry team with women on it, if a man comes up, at least it's in a public setting.
Yeah.
And if he really needed to speak to a man, they could find another time to do that, I guess.
We would hope so, yes.
Okay.
But it's making that obvious, and it's talking to people. And I might be wrong, but I think that men feel less threatened by having two women than a woman would having two men.
Yeah.
But we do have guys who come and say, no, I do not want a woman.
Sure.
And we would try and arrange to have two men, but that's not always possible and can take longer.
Okay. I want to move on to some more perhaps specific difficulties, not difficulties, but situations that probably occur quite a lot. Supposing a member of a ministry team is feeling worn out or perhaps spiritually, under par, is it a good idea to step back from ministry for a while?
It can be. I think I would encourage them to talk to their ministry team leader or whoever's heading up that ministry about what's going on. It might be that it's sensible for them to take a step back, but I'd also want to, within that, make sure that they've got somebody who they're accountable to or somebody who can support them so that they don't feel just left. It can be very easy to be somebody who prays a lot for others and then you need to take a step back and you find, well, I can't ask for anybody because I wouldn't want everybody knowing about it. Mm-hmm. Let's check and see what's going on there. But sometimes it's good to actually carry on and push in and think, well, Lord, there's an awful lot else that's going on in my life, but I'm going to choose to come and minister. Within that, I would also say, just be aware if it's a grief issue or an abuse issue or something like that you've going on for yourself, that you're recovering from, be aware that praying for somebody else in that situation may be difficult.
Because the idea being that actually, even if we are not, feeling at our best, we are still in the great God who can work through us, as long as we take care over that. And
we've got prayer ministers here who come and on different occasions will say, well, Sarah, I know I've not got a great deal of energy or I might be struggling a bit, but they're coming and choosing to say, but I believe God can use me, but I believe God will bless me, and actually coming here and ministering, I will feel better at the end. Now that's not always appropriate, but very often people say, I'm going to choose to do it, because if I don't, God isn't being glorified.
One issue that I'm often asked about when we go around churches is that what do we do about those people that seem to come up week in, week out, and whenever you offer ministry, they're always there, often the first up, and after a while the ministry team kind of run out of ideas. What would you do about that?
In those situations, before the person comes up and says, hey John or whoever it is, this is my long list of woes that I come with again, I'd want to say, well, what has God been doing? We've been doing a lot of praying. What have you seen change? And I'd want to encourage them to think, actually, yes, what have I seen God change?
So you change the focus to begin with, from their need to what has been happening.
Yes. And then I would want to encourage whoever's praying for them to say, what do you want Jesus to do for you today? It's what we do here, but what do you want Jesus to do for you today? Because very often people come and they have a long list of things, and the list that they have this week will be slightly different from last week, but because they haven't come with something specific, they haven't noticed what Jesus has done. And so there's no encouragement for them, and there's no encouragement for those people who are praying.
Okay.
And then you have those situations which are seriously long-term with health issues.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to say, Jesus, come and help me to pray. I've run out of words, but maybe pray in the Spirit. Lord, come with your love. Sometimes you're walking with that person on a difficult journey.
And so you just need to recognise this is going to be a long-term thing, because they're on a journey and our job is to walk with them through that journey.
Yes, it may be. Or else it may be that we don't necessarily see exactly the answer that we want, but we miss what God has done. I know someone who has had cancer for a number of years now and wasn't expected to be alive. In fact, was expected to have died a couple of years ago. And she is still with us. Praise God. Well, she still has her struggles, and she still doesn't want to be ill. She still wants healing. But the fact that she is here 18 months after she was expected to be dead and buried, I think it's an answer to prayer.
Yes.
To many prayers.
Yes. One of the things that always strikes me about prayer ministry is that if you're on the team, at the front of the church, you never really know what's going to come up next. People can come up with any number of issues. It might be health related, it might be something totally different, and you never really know until they speak what the issue is. And it's always good not to make the assumption that we know. But what do we do if somebody shares something and we immediately feel out of our depth? We think, I have no experience of this, I don't know what to say, I don't really know what they're talking about. What do we do?
I think in those situations, part of what is kind for the person who you're praying for is to say, I may not be the best person to pray for you in this situation. In a ministry team at the end of church, you might feel this is just out of my depth. And you may just want to say, would you mind, we're just going to go and find somebody else who we think might be able to bless you and help you. That's one thing you might want to do.
And I suppose in that, if you are meeting with somebody else, if one person feels out of their depth, one hopes the other one might feel a bit more emboldened.
Yeah.
And if they both run for
if
the
they
doors,
both run for the doors, you've got a problem. That may well be that the other person feels okay.
Yes. Okay.
I've had situations a long time ago when people have come up and said, Sarah, we don't feel that we can deal with this. And we've prayed quietly for the person, and then we've arranged another appointment for them. At the end of the day, though, Jesus knows. Jesus knows this person, and by soaking him in the Father's love, by inviting them to see where Jesus is and talk with him, Jesus can do beautiful things without us needing to be the ones who fix it, who have the answers. Because there can be that danger of feeling we need to have the answers. And recognising that we don't, recognising that it's Jesus who does, is a much better place to be in.
So being out of your depth might be a good thing, because it will make you more reliant upon him and not on our own skills and wisdom and knowledge.
It might be. I think there's a balance within that. Sometimes it increases our faith and we have to step out more. At other times, just ask for discernment. I think we need to ask for discernment, because we can, on occasion, really put our foot in it with somebody. I know people who've tried to cast out demons from people or felt that was appropriate, when actually there's been grave trauma going on, and assuming one thing when something else is going on is not kind and doesn't honour God, and leaves the person in a worse place than they were in before.
Okay. I want to move on to the whole area of what we call here supervision. It sounds quite a grand word. But the idea is that as part of a team, hopefully there is somebody overseeing the team.
Yeah.
And they have a role to make sure that the team members are, fairly happy with what they're going on. Do you suggest that after every Sunday morning session, there is a kind of a debriefing session with all the prayer ministers, or is that not necessary, or only when it's wanted? How would you do that?
I would always encourage whoever's been praying to pray as a group at the end of a ministry session, whether it's just that there have just been two people who give the person back to God, the people they've been praying for back to God, whether it's a wider team. I think it's always good to come and acknowledge what God's done, to reflect on anything that you may have been uncomfortable with, or just to say, "Come, Lord, we've served you, would you refresh us?"
In a small church, if there's no one to actually lead that any time of supervision,
Yep.
how could two people do it together without somebody helping them? Is there a kind of a process you'd go through, or something that you'd look for?
I think part of it is giving ourselves permission to be accountable to one another, and having that heart that we want to bless others in this ministry, we want to be the best that we can be. And so if you and I, for example, were ministering and we hadn't got somebody else to talk with afterwards, I could say to you, were you happy with that? Was there anything you might have done differently? Did you have a sense of anything else that God might have been doing? Should we give thanks, or whatever?
What do you do if you really disagree with what your co-minister was doing? Would you tell them? Nicely.
Yes, I would.
Can you give us an example?
Sometimes people don't hear exactly what has been said by the person who's praying. And so if someone then says, "Can you say such and such?" or asks the person, you may want to say, actually, they've already said something, so that you're protecting the person who's received prayer in a particular situation.
Would you kind of intervene and correct during the session itself, or would you wait till afterwards?
I would want to make sure that the person was comfortable, and if they were being put under pressure to do something that you felt they'd already done, you might just want to say, I think you've said that, haven't you, to the person. And it's not that you're trying to make it difficult for the other prayer minister. You're both there wanting to facilitate one person's engagement with God. And I would hope that we would be open to that.
Okay. Just one final thing, is this the issue of confidentiality?
Yeah.
In that I think that if we go for ministry, we'd like to think that what we share is going to be confidential, and we certainly wouldn't want the whole church asking us about our problems the week after.
And we need to be sensitive to that. You'd want to make sure on your team that people aren't gossips.
Yes.
That you don't go up to somebody in the coffee queue and say, "Well, how are you after we prayed for whatever medical condition it was last week?"
Sure.
But then there are those issues where we need to say, "Look, if we have concerns about harm to you or to others, we'll have a duty to disclose it," and the prayer ministers may need to talk with their church leader about that, who will know what to do.
So that's the step, that if a prayer minister is feeling, that they're burdened by what has just been shared to them, go and talk to the church leader or the prayer ministry leader. Don't feel you have to keep it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Even if someone has said, "You will keep this secret, won't you?" they have to feel released to speak to someone?
I think if someone says, "You will keep this confidential, won't you?" we have to say, "I'm sorry, I may not be able to do that."
Right. And we should feel at peace to do that.
We need to feel at peace to do it, and we need to know that that is part of our guidelines for that person, for the best for them and for the church, that we can't keep everything confidential.
Finally, what would you say to, perhaps somebody starting out on their local church ministry team, and maybe they've done a bit of training, but this is the Sunday they're going to get unleashed upon the world, and they're feeling really kind of nervous and not sure if they're up to it, what would you say to them?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Go for it. No, God loves the fact that you are going to take a step to do this. He delights in the fact that you're seeking to be obedient. Ask him to give you peace and enjoy it.
Sarah, thank you.